1, 2, check, check, check. 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 Whose phone's going on?
Yes, that's the one. What do you do for a living?
Did you say you had some duct tape?
Oh, yeah.
I taped your mic.
Oh, you did?
You did from,
Oh, okay, cool.
Just a little
That's, yeah, I was going to put something right here, but that's perfect. Thank you. No worries.
Okay,
Anybody else need any
we'll
tape?
get started.
Does anybody else need any gaff tape? Your mic, you're good.
Perfect. Okay, and y'all are ready
We are ready.
for detectives? Cool. We will bring them out. Oh, either, yeah. All right, so really quick, before we get started here, I just want to let you know the purpose of today's press conference is just to provide an overview regarding the homicide that was at 500 Canyon Ridge Drive. We've just had a lot of questions from multiple outlets regarding this homicide, so we wanted to provide some clarity and give you a chance to kind of ask those questions all together. We will be giving the overview and then open it up for questions. When we do open up for questions, I do ask that you raise your hand. I will call on you and have someone else on deck. And then speaking will be the lead investigator in this case. This is Detective Bryce Bishop. That's B-R-I-C-E, last name Bishop, B-I-S-H-O-P, and he is a detective with the Homicide Unit in the Austin Police Department.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. As mentioned, I'm the lead investigator on homicide number 47 in Austin. Incident occurred on Friday, September 27th, 2024 at approximately 3:50 p.m. We received numerous 911 calls advising that a shooting had occurred at the HEB on Canyon Ridge. Multiple callers indicated that it was a possible active shooter. That would eventually prove to not be the case. A caller stated that a subject had been shoplifting and lunged at a security guard with a knife, and the caller stated the security guard attempted to tase the subject and then shot him. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about that incident and obviously field any questions that you guys may have. So initially talking, the HEB at Canyon Ridge, they have a one-armed security officer who works for Allied Universal Security Services. That male is named Warren Owosu, and that will be the subject of our investigation. Mr. Owosu was working his single-man post and received notification from management that the subject was acting erratically inside of the facility and was possibly possessing a knife. Mr. Owosu entered the store, made contact with our decedent, who was identified as Michael Rosario Jr. Rosario can be seen through a combination of different video footages and body-worn camera footage, acting erratically, appears to be on the influence, under the influence of something, and it was initially concerning in nature because there's a lot of bystanders around in this HEB at this particular time. With that being said, Mr. Owosu is a level 4 security guard licensed by the state of Texas through DPS. He is armed, he does have a taser, and he was wearing a uniform and body armor. Mr. Owosu makes contact with the male, attempting to engage in communication. He asks him to request that he leave the store, attempts multiple times to try to talk the subject into leaving the store calmly. At no point in time does he have any type of physical contact with him. Does he block his exit? He maintains a safe distance and communicates with that subject. That subject briefly communicates with him, but not to a level that would be consistent with communication that would lead me to believe that he was in a right mental state. Mr. Owosu proceeded for the next 14 to 15 minutes to try to communicate with Mr. Rosario. That communication failed. There were also members of management from HEB that attempted to communicate with Mr. Rosario. That communication also failed, and he did not leave the store despite being asked to many times. Again, there was no point in physical contact by anybody. A safe distance was kept from Mr. Rosario, and he continued to pace back and forth in the front exit of the store. 911 had been contacted. Again, while waiting for a police response, they continued to try to communicate with Mr. Rosario, and after that 14 to 15 minutes elapses, Mr. Owosu again tries to make contact with Michael. In doing so, Rosario is holding a HEB basket. In the HEB basket, he's got a hubcap, and then he's carrying a large stick in his opposite hand. When the security guard, Mr. Owosu, goes back to try to make contact with him, he displays that hubcap, displays it as a shield out in front of him concerning Mr. Owosu. Mr. Owosu verbalized on his body camera footage that he was concerned about Mr. Rosario's actions, and asked him to step out of the store, which he does not comply. Continuing on, they continue this communication, and Mr. Rosario attempts to make motions towards Mr. Owosu, the security guard. That shield is displayed, or that hubcap is displayed, utilized as a shield. Mr. Owosu draws his taser and actively targets Mr. Rosario, who does not comply and keeps that shield still up. He again gives him commands. A knife is displayed from his pocket, and he again gives him multiple commands and loud verbal commands to drop the knife. Mr. Rosario makes a motion and a jabbing motion towards Mr. Owosu, the security guard, and in doing so, Mr. Owosu attempts to fire his less lethal option, which was his taser. That is ineffective and does not stop Mr. Rosario, and Mr. Rosario continues to charge at Mr. Owosu, who then transitions to his lethal weapon and fires approximately 4 shots. We have 15 minutes-ish of de-escalation that he attempts to talk to Mr. Rosario before this occurs. Obviously, throughout the entire time, they're communicating with 911, and once APD arrives, Mr. Owosu continues to remain there, continues to assist with medical aid to try to save Mr. Rosario, and ultimately that was unsuccessful. Continuing on, Mr. Owosu was compliant with the investigation, cooperative with law enforcement, as were HEB and Allied Universal Security. So I'd like to thank them all for their cooperation in that. This is still an active investigation at this time. I'm thankful and appreciative of, obviously, the entities involved with Allied Universal and HEB for their cooperation in this investigation, and extremely thankful that Mr. Owosu made attempts to de-escalate the situation and also was able to stop what I believe to be a potential threat that could have seriously injured people inside of that HEB. I think it's important to note the consideration when talking to Mr. Owosu, the consideration of the bystanders and all the people involved. We had small children that were coming within feet of the male as Mr. Rosario, as he was holding the knife and acting erratically. And I think that he acted appropriately and used all means of de-escalation and less lethal force that he possibly could.
You can open to questions. Raise your hand.
Sir, why did it take so long for APD to respond, considering the 15-minute time gap and patrol units possibly in the area? Why did it take so long for APD to respond?
Sure. So the question fielded was, why did it take so long for APD to respond? I don't know the answer to that. My job as a homicide investigator is to investigate the incident that occurred. You'd have to check with another entity of the department to figure that out.
Yes, so I understand officers walking on Friday so that they were responding initially to a trespass call. Can you elaborate on that before they started getting the 911 calls of multiple shootings?
Sure. So the question asked was regarding the different changes in fielding the call from a trespass to initially a shots fired. And I think that happens with any incident. It's not uncommon, at least from a patrol perspective, right? You might initially respond to something that is a trespass urgent. That could quickly change into anything based off of the threat analyzed by the 911 call taker and what they're seeing, right? So this one particular switched from a trespass urgent to a shots fired, to a shoot, stab, hot shot, I believe, based off of that going on. And I believe that would have to do with whatever was being said on the 911 call relating to Mr. Rosario's behavior, and then obviously the shots being fired within HEB.
Was the security guard a off-duty officer or a former officer?
I have no indication or information indicating that he was any type of law enforcement at all. Like I said, he is currently a licensed security officer through Texas DPS, and I believe it's a level 4 security clearance.
Angela, still no charges for the security guard today.
At this time, there are no charges for Mr. Owosu. He's cooperative with the investigation, and it's still an ongoing criminal investigation.
Is there any security guard body cam video or even surveillance video from the store that's possibly going to be released?
Sure. So, as mentioned previously, the question fielded was if there was store video or body camera video. Both. We do have both. We have store video thanks to the cooperation of HEB, and then body camera video thanks to the cooperation of Mr. Owosu and Allied Security. We have both, but they cannot be released until I consult with the Travis County DA's office on that.
Do you know if the victim was from Austin or was it a homeless person?
I don't have any information on his living status. I have his identity. He does have associations in Austin, but in terms of where he was living and where he was staying, I don't have that information for you.
Should people, be worried going to this HEB, and, is HEB going to add more patrols in that area?
Yes, the question asked was if people should be worried to go to the HEB, and if more patrols were going to be acquired there through APD. In terms of being worried, I think I answered this earlier, but I would have no concern or worry at all to go to the HEB there. Mr. Owosu acted appropriately, and as mentioned before, I think that his actions probably saved multiple people and prevented what could have been probably tragic injury for multiple people.
How is he right now? Is he taking time off?
So I initially spoke to Mr. Owosu, and he was extremely distraught following the incident, particularly when I told him that Mr. Rosario had passed. I think he's spending some time with some family, and I'm going to leave it at that so that he can have his time.
So what weapons were actually found on the body of the suspect?
Sure.
The knife and anything else?
Sure. So Mr. Rosario was found seen both on video and found on scene. A black-handled steak knife, just a typical kitchen knife, was found. That can be seen produced from his pocket, and that can also be seen on his body camera footage being held in his hand. I think it's also important to note that we've got a couple means of self-defense on his portion, both with the hubcap that he was using as a shield to block that less lethal weapon, and then a large water jug that he had picked up as well.
Did he have any kind of criminal history?
So I'm going to talk about this incident, but I'd like to not disclose his criminal history just with the current active investigation we have ongoing.
Was he observed shoplifting anything?
No, ma'am. So I believe the initial call for service from the management to Mr. Owosu was just regarding his status, and it can be seen pretty clearly on camera. He, when Mr. Owosu walks in and activates his body camera, it's concerning to me because Mr. Rosario was pacing back and forth right in the proximity of an exit where we've got small children and families walking through. He's got that large stick in his hand, so I think the concern at that point was to ensure that Mr. Rosario was okay and that nobody was going to be in danger. I also think it's important to note that on the body camera footage of Mr. Owosu, he talks multiple times to Mr. Rosario, talking about, hey man, is there any family that I can call for you? Is there anybody I can call to help you? What's going on, man? What'd you do before this, right? So these are all things that we as a police officer look for as steps to try to engage communication with that subject, right? Try to de-escalate that situation, figure out what's going on, and try to understand that. And I think Mr. Owusu did a really good job of that.
So are you saying there was no shoplifting, but just erratic behavior?
He never exited the store, so I can't tell you if HEB would consider that shoplifting or not. He was past the register with the shopping cart in his hand, but in terms of shoplifting, that's not what I'm here to investigate at this time.
How the community can help on this current investigation?
I think the community can help. If you've got any information, I guess reach out to our public information office or to the 512-974-TIPS, the Central Texas Crime Stoppers. I know there were a lot of folks that were in that store, saw things. If there's any type of video that you feel that would be beneficial to our investigation, please send that over because I think it would help.
Your last question here, thanks, Dan.
The 911 calls initially, were they just a matter of concern, or were they frantic? What exactly was contained in those 911 calls?
So I think there was a combination, right? And as mentioned when we kind of talked about earlier, how this call transitioned from a trespass to a shots fired, right? Our initial couple of callers are Mr. Owusu himself and then management from HEB, concerned about his behavior inside the HEB with all those people inside. The next callers after that, after the shots were fired, were frantic callers concerned about a possible active shooter situation within HEB.
Yeah, one more, last one.
The shooting itself, what part of the store did it happen in? Was it beyond the cash registers? Or?
So it was between the exit and the cash registers. Again, that entire kind of area right there is used because Mr. Rosario is doing a bunch of pacing back and forth. So it kind of evolves, but it's all within that, between that cash register area and the exit.
The entire incident was between them?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Detective. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Of course. Thanks so much, Claire.
I have so much trouble finding parking. That's why I was late.
You're fine. Do not worry.
Running over.
No, I'm glad you're SVP. We're waiting for you. Don't you worry. You're fine. The parking is
So nice of you.
horrific around here. Seriously.
Yeah.
You are totally fine. Thanks for coming, Claire. We appreciate you. Okay, I was trying to get this tape off, and I think I made it worse. I'm sorry, guys.
Don't let it touch itself.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
oh, look what you've done.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
man. That's my
I try to be
stand,
helpful,
too.
and it
Oh,
just never works in
man.
my favor. What's that? Clara. Yes. Kelsey. Yes. I know that. I've emailed you a lot. I kind of like stalk you guys on TV, so.